You're listening to Level Up with Melissa Zeloof from ironSource.
So, hi everyone and welcome back. I'm Melissa Zeloof and you're listening to Level Up, the podcast for people who love making, growing and of course playing mobile games. In today's episode, we're going to take a deeper dive into the world of sports games with one of the industry's veterans. Oh, Mike, I actually forgot to ask you how you pronounce your surname. I'm going to go with Taramykin. Yes, no?
That is the second most popular. Well, actually, that is probably the most popular. The second most popular is Taramykin, which is how I pronounce it. Taramykin. Okay, Mike Taramykin, founder and CEO of what I'm going to say is HypGames, and hope very, very much that it's not HypGames. Right? Wrong? 0 for 2, but okay.
HypGames it is, guys. Normally I do this before we actually start recording. A studio that specializes in mobile sports games. So Mike, maybe we like to start with having our guests tell us a little bit about yourselves. You were a VP at EA Sports before moving to Zynga to do the same. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got into the game industry and how you came to be so passionate about the sort of intersection between sports and media and gaming?
Sure. And thank you for having me. And by the way, your pronunciation of both my name and the company name are actually the more popular ones.
But not right.
Well, whatever. I just go against the trend, I guess. So I got into gaming, I think, the way most people do, as a way of avoiding real work. Right out of college, said let's make games because the other alternative involves putting on suits and listening to people and being responsible and stuff like that. And so I started a company right out of college in the early 90s, which is sounding longer and longer away, the more I say it, with a friend of mine from school. And, we said, let's do this for a little while and eventually have to go get real jobs. And then that lasted 12 years. There was a company called Hypnotics. We were based in New York City first and eventually New Jersey. And then in 2005, Hypnotics got acquired by EA. And we moved the entire team down to Orlando, Florida, from from the New York area to Florida, which I've learned is a migration that many people do, just usually later in life.
Yes.
So we moved the company here and went from building, kind of like offbeat sports games like Outlaw Golf and a game called Deer Avenger, where the deer hunts people. To working on the Tiger Woods PGA Tour franchise for 8 years, which I did when I was at EA. So that's kind of how I got into it. Was figured let's do this for a little while, have some fun, and then eventually go get a real job, and then it sort of turned into one.
And tell us about HypGames. Based on is it sort of like a nostalgia for the original first company, or no? Just
Absolutely, it is. That's we couldn't figure out what to call the company, and we had this habit when we were at Hypnotics where we would call all of our tools and all of our technology. We would just say what it does and put the word hip in front of it. So hip animation, hip particles, hip audio, and stuff like that. And we're like, well, I guess we can just say, well, we're going to want to make games. Let's just stick a hip in front of it. So
nice.
And like everything else, we'll change it later.
Yes. When we get the real jobs.
Right. Or, when we get tired, we'll do it. And then eventually it just becomes that. But which ironically, for all the time that we did, that we were running Hypnotics, it was HypNotix and everybody thought it was just Hypnotix. And we sold concert tickets. So we have this history of having hard to pronounce names.
I feel like I would have pronounced that correctly if given the chance, but I can't.
Well, it was the 90s. You stuck an X at the end of something. It just made it cooler,
Yes. So tell us a little bit about it. What are you guys focused on, and what you're most excited about?
Yeah, for the most part, it's always been, for us, it's always been kind of this passion for sports games. And it's really not so much a passion for sports games as it is for sports gamers.
Okay.
It's a fascinating market because, a lot of gaming is about fantasy and about creating, worlds that don't really exist, and and kind of interacting with them. But I think in sports, it's really about connecting with somebody's pre-existing passion for something in the real world and giving them another way to express it and another way to kind of interact with with people and places that they follow in real life. So in a way, we kind of ride along with somebody's kind of existing interest in something, as opposed to just trying to convince them to go kind of live in a virtual world that we've created. And so it has its challenges, but it also has incredible opportunities. And so, for us, after 8 years at EA, after a couple of years at Zynga, and then a company called FanDuel, which is also, kind of in the sports category, but more based on sports betting and stuff like that. What we realized is that there's this incredible, I'll call it opportunity, kind of growing with mobile devices, which may sound a little cliche now, but take it back a couple of years, and there was still a little bit of question about where things were going. For us, the thing was always look, if you have a phone with you 100% of the time, that is your entertainment device. That is your gaming platform. That is your way to communicate. And I think, and I'm skipping ahead to one of the questions that I know you might ask.
Good, you go.
which is kind of what, where is everything going? And part of it for us was the thing with gaming is it's always been about technology. It's always been about, graphics, and, it's in the game, and you're trying to recreate this whole world. And for us, probably, about 10 years ago, we started to realize it's really gaming's about people, and it's really about the community, and it's about the players who all kind of get together and interact and stuff like that. And it used to be you would do it on your living room couch in front of a TV. You would plug in and you'd kind of join this virtual world of whether it's Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, where you would connect with gaming friends. And then once the mobile phones came along, well, suddenly that world is always with you. So it's really hard to think about if I'm going to be part of this community, if I'm going to be part of this, group of players who all kind of get together and compete and whatnot, that I'm only going to do it when I'm home and when I have time to be in front of the TV. And so, for us, when we started HypGames, it was really about how do we take everything we've learned from sports gaming in general, packaged goods and consoles, and just have it always be with you and have it always be on. And how do we build kind of an infrastructure and a platform to have these competitive communities of just, people all around the world that have a passion for, one sport or another, that are always connected and, are always basically one tap away from competing.
Were there challenges in kind of trying to port the sports games experience and build competitive communities from sort of PC and console onto mobile? Or was it actually kind of not freeing, right? But all of a sudden you could do so much more?
In many ways, there were not that many. So things like graphics and things like just the actual experience. Phones today are what consoles were maybe 10 years ago. Not even 10, probably even less. But the point is, we've kind of technologically we've crossed over the line where people even notice the differences between what your latest Xbox can do and what your latest iPhone can do. So that part of it is actually a lot easier. The part that's more challenging is how do you design games and how do you design experiences that are made for the mobile moments that you have. So it's the old Starbucks line. It's how do you create a game that you could play with one hand in the time it takes you, for a red light to change. Which, by the way, you should never play
do.
Right, you should never do that. Right. Well, we don't say that. We all know it. We just don't say it.
Yeah.
But the idea is, I don't want to call it challenging part, but I think the part that you have to deal with is taking those experiences, breaking them down to these bite-sized portions. It's how do you create games that you can play in under a minute, like where the experiences are a minute or less, where you can kind of just open up your phone, do it, interact, and then put it back away without having to set aside half hour or 10 minutes or whatnot. And so that's been a bit of a challenge, but at the same time, that's actually the exciting part. Is, that's the difference. Because once you do that, you could just fit into more people's days.
And to more of people's days.
Right, exactly. And so, and then it becomes, and then just playing your game becomes part of everybody's, daily kind of activities. And as a result, what we've seen is, when we launched our golf game, Ultimate Golf, in March of 2020, odd timing, but, like literally as lockdowns were happening, we started growing up, we started building up this user base, which to this day, there are, an incredible amount of players that we have now that have been playing since the day we launched and have never missed a day. And we credit a lot of that for the way the game is really designed, which is, if you have 5 minutes, you check in and you play. That's the difference, really, between a console game and a mobile game. Is mobile games are really designed for these bite-sized portions. You end up spending probably the same amount of time per day, but you have to break it up, and the game has to be designed in such a way that someone could be in the middle of something and someone walks in the room and they have to be able to stop, deal with their real life, and then come back and pick up exactly where they left off.
Are there other things that sort of a studio building mobile first sports games should keep in mind in terms of game design and development?
Well, probably the stuff I just talked about. If I was wiser, I would have broken that up into 2 sections. But no, just that. It's really kind of understanding that your games are supposed to fit into people's lives. They're not supposed to stop their lives to to make time for you. You're supposed to fit into those little cracks we have, every day between things that we do.
What about business model? How well do sports games sort of lend themselves to free-to-play, the free-to-play model?
Well, if you ask me, I say they're perfect. Because, again, the hardest thing with mobile is just sort of the nature of how how fragile audiences can be, because the device is always with you, everything on it is free, and so if you kind of deal with, I guess, modern society, which tends to be tends to not have a long attention span. One of the biggest challenges you always have is boredom. Like with games, somebody plays a game for a little while, like, this is fun, okay, now something new comes along and I'm going to go play that. I think one of the unique opportunities about sports games is, again, that it's really kind of piggybacking on an existing passion that somebody has. Nobody wakes up one day and says, I've been playing golf all my life, but I'm over it. Or, I've been following, the NFL my whole life and I'm done. So I've lost interest. I'm now gonna, I'm now into, whatever, sci-fi fantasy. And so what that allows us to do is, because the real world of sports continues to kind of move on, we're able to kind of piggyback on that as well. We're always able to be timely. We're always able to be relevant. And in mobile, it's really important to keep people's attention. So by us being able to draft on somebody's existing passion as well as what's happening in the real world, it really gives us a leg up on, we don't have to keep creating our worlds. We can just keep representing the real world and always being timely and always being, and always being new and relevant.
So let's talk a little bit about that sort of relationship with the real world and with sports franchises, right? Especially in America. My husband is actually American, so I come across this quite a lot. We have football, real football, not soccer. But America really has a very rich kind of sports culture. How do you sort of make sure, what goes into building a relationship with massive, sports franchises? What does that kind of give you, and how can it make things sometimes, I guess, also more difficult? And how do you sort of make sure that you're, on the one hand, giving sort of fans an experience that feels consistent with what they get sort of in the real world, but also new enough that they'd want to engage with it on their phone versus, on the TV or in an actual game?
That's a really good question, and I think it'll probably take up the rest of the time that we have. So I'll try to do the abridged version of it.
Go wild.
Well, no, I mean, I think when it comes to licenses or IP or any of that in sports, at the end of the day, the key is authenticity. Right? At the end of the day, if people are trying to, connect with an existing passion, it's like there's a certain element of that, sport or whatnot that has to be there in order for it to feel genuine and authentic. But we kind of call it that, right? We leave it at like authenticity. It has to be authentic. It's not that it has to be licensed. You asked kind of like a couple of facets there. I'm going to try to remember them in order, but please correct me if I drift. Yeah, correct me if I drift. But I think the important part whenever you're dealing with a license or an IP is it's a partner. Right, it's somebody that's gone out and created something that has, value. That you're now joining forces, to deliver another product to gamers. And so they're partners, right? They're not selling you a good. You're in business together. And so from a financial perspective, it has to be equitable for both sides. So you have to get something out of it. They have to get something out of it too. And a lot of times, both parties are always going to be looking out for their interests. So whenever you go into one of these deals, you have to understand you can't just do what you want because you're paying them. And likewise, they can't make you do what they want just because it's their brand. And the more you kind of understand what it is that the licensor is looking from this relationship, besides the financial part, usually, it's access to new users, it's technology. I mean, there's, everybody's got their own kind of agendas besides the commercial terms of something. Of a deal. So just understanding that makes it a lot easier to kind of work together, to kind of say like, how do we fit into your business? How do we fit into like your other partners' relationships? How do we kind of carve out sort of a space there where we bring so much value that we continue to work together and goes, the business grows from there. That's obviously when you're dealing with, I should say that varies depending on the nature of the license. In some cases, you have these kind of gatekeeper licenses like the NFL, which your husband is right to consider real football. But this is going so well, so we'll just leave it. We'll leave it at that. But I guess I should have asked is what team does he support?
The Steelers. The Steelers is not a good time to be a Steeler fan right now.
It's not. I'm a Giants fan. I honestly don't have too many problems with Steeler fans, so that's okay. a little bit a different Pennsylvania team, and maybe maybe I'd be on your side. But anyway, forgot where I was. The idea is like when you deal with kind of these. You deal with these gatekeeper kind of licenses where if you want to do authentic football, working with the NFL is just really important. Likewise with the NBA, the MLB, FIFA. See, shout out to you. So it's really important that you kind of understand that you're part of like this universe of partners. But sports really isn't just that, especially on mobile. There's obviously very successful golf games and pool games and tennis games and fishing games and all these other kind of kind of traditionally more lifestyle sports than a particular league. And there it's different. There, I think when we add authenticity, it's really about how do we connect with with various brands within the sport that lend that authenticity. Like, we make a golf game, so our relationships with individual golf courses are important. Our relationships with individual golfers for different things are important. It's a lot more decentralized when you get into some of these other sports, and there it's a slightly different dynamic because there, it's kind of like this universe of partners that you work with that collectively really add that level of realism and authenticity to the product, but it's not any one particular. And so now, on the one hand, you have to deal with a lot more partners, but it's a relatively more level playing field because it tends to be, instead of David and Goliath, it's like David and other Davids. So, and we're all kind of in it together, which we've been successful doing. And I think even even at EA with Tiger Woods, it was also very important for us to have these individual relationships as opposed to like this one central license.
So talking about sort of also games that aren't sort of so IP dependent, what are some of the elements that you implement to attract players and keep them engaged? How do you get someone to sort of, beyond the fact that they might already be sort of passionate about a given sport in their real lives, how do you attract and keep players in a sports game that isn't about sort of like, enjoying the NFL on your phone and not just on your TV?
Sheesh. Well, I mean, that changes daily. If you want to get into like the nature of, user acquisition, mobile user acquisition, that's a completely, but I'll speak higher level.
Mm-hmm.
We try to make games that are easy to play and difficult to master, right? We try to make games where people can jump in and kind of get familiar with how to play very quickly, start to feel confident and good. And then we put them, we match them up with someone else who's what was that?
Then it becomes really hard.
Well, no, not that it becomes hard, but it's like, what we do is we take people, we teach them how to play the game, they get good at it, and then we pair them up with somebody who's just as good at it. And it's just the competition between, like, we let human nature drive, basically. The sooner we pair you up with someone that you're competing against, that's at the right kind of challenge level to you, the more likely you are to be successful, and then not successful, and then want to get better, and then kind of get into this cycle as we do in real life. It's like the first time I hit a golf ball, I'm like, oh, that wasn't so hard, and then 20 years later, I still suck at it. But I feel like I'm making progress. But so it's kind of getting, because the thing with sports is, it scratches that competitive itch that everybody has. And I think for game developers, sports game developers, it's about, how do we get people to understand how to play, and then let them out into kind of like the world with other competitors, and let them. The challenge is trying to try and beat somebody else. We always say it's not about good and like who's good and who's bad. It's about who's good and who's great. Right? It's like we make the games easy for everybody, but then talent and skill always plays a part in it. And so the sooner we get them into these competitive leagues and into, forming teams and groups, and we call them country clubs in Ultimate Golf, the sooner we get people congregating and competing with others, that's how we keep them. Because I don't think anybody sticks around because of us. I think people stick around in our games because of the other people that are playing. And so we always have to empower that social interaction, because the best glue is people, right? I mean, it's why you don't want to switch. It's why you don't want to move when you get a better job in a different town. It's because you don't want to leave people, right? It's never about anything other than, well, at least that's always the biggest thing. Restaurants too, I think. But
and like looking ahead, right? Because I think you talked a little bit about how, for a while, or in some senses, gaming has been about technology, but also about people. Going back now to technology, when you look at the future of sports games, what do you sort of, it doesn't have to be a prediction, right? But what do you think, how do you think sports games are going to evolve, and is new tech going to play a part in that?
Sure. Well, we're a independent mobile game developer. We are all about prediction. We are all about because I mean, I think one of our strengths is just agility, right? It's being able to kind of see where things are going and just go do it. I love working at bigger companies. I love working, with all the resources and capabilities that you have. But one of the things you rarely have is the ability to just, kind of see something and go after it. There's a lot more thoughtfulness and process involved, whereas, the more independent you are, the more you just kind of it can really jump on stuff. So that does put us in the prediction business, because unfortunately we don't have the luxury of being wrong too often. So where do we see things going? That is a great question. I say in many ways a lot has been accomplished since 2007 when the iPhone came out. The power of a mobile phone is more than a console was a few years ago. the connectivity is really there to the level where people don't even think about gaming on their phones anymore. Believe it or not, there was a point where people were like, why would I play games on my phone? And it wasn't. I want to say it wasn't that long ago, but when I do the math, it really was kind of long ago. But if I'm honest, but where I see things going is really just when you look at like emerging technologies, like just location-based gaming. Games that are aware of where you are and what's going on. Things that the more you can connect to real life, the better, in my opinion. So the fact that we can have games that respond to like what's happening in the real world of sports in real time is great. The fact that a game knows that your mobile game knows that you are at a stadium or you are near a stadium or what town you're in and what team is popular, the more that it can just sort of personalize and really kind of personalize the experience and connect you to the real world, we think the better. Obviously, metaverse, VR, and AR, all that plays part of it. But I think that's kind of like this broader. It's kind of like this broader theme about just, at least for sports, about connecting you to the real world and real people, and then letting competition be the reason why you're there. So rather than like, hey, we're going to matchmake you with somebody in the world that's like you, is we're going to matchmake you with somebody that's near you or somebody that's in the same stadium as you because you're both at a game together. Just and I'm not saying that whether those are good or bad ideas. What I'm saying is that the technology is there to do it, and so now we can figure out how to come up with good ideas, based on
that possibility,
based on the capabilities that I think are really becoming. I want to say common at least in that a lot of people are looking at it, and a lot of people are kind of like in that space, which means consumers are now aware of it too. So now when you tell them, when you start talking about location, well, that's a very technical term, right? But
games.
Yeah, but I think when you start talking about like virtual worlds and things like that, I mean, most people know what you're talking about.
And now you can feel free to do a shameless plug. What are the sort of most exciting sports games projects that you can sort of think of today? Can be a self-plug, doesn't have to be.
What's funny is that's the question I had the hardest time answering because a lot of it is when you're when you're in our position and we're always trying to like innovate, we're always trying to get, we always get the most excited about the things that we're doing, right? Because we're doing them because they're the things we're the most excited about. So, it's a little chicken and egg situation there. Like, I think broadly, I love how sports and technology just continue to like merge at breakneck speed. Right? I think everything is being gamified, which is great when you're a game company. So high level, I love seeing just the amount of technology that is coming into sports, because that gives us opportunities to kind of connect. So there's a lot of like individual kind of initiatives there that we see happening, certainly in simulation, certainly in VR, things that really kind of put you in the experience at that moment. What the timeline for those is, I don't know. I'm also really really excited about how digital media in general and gaming are coming together. One of the things that we do a lot in our games and in Ultimate Golf is we almost create like these interactive podcasts within our game where we bring in somebody notable, whether it's a PGA Tour golfer, whether it's Alice Cooper or musicians that are known for playing golf. We sit down with them while they play our game, and stream that live into the actual game so people can play along in real time while they're there. We used to do that a lot on kind of consoles, but now it's with you all the time. So we've done some events where we have worked with Alice Cooper, Nico McBrain from Iron Maiden. You're British, so you might know. As well as Lee Westwood and others, where we create these special events within our game where we bring in notable people, and sometimes just members of our own community, and then we create these kind of live events that people show up for, and then not only listen and watch but also play along and try to beat them. And that's where I think the convergence is really happening. There's a show that we love called The Match, where where they take famous people and they have them just play golf together. So started with Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson, and then it's gone to like NFL quarterbacks and stuff like that. And we love this kind of idea of kind of riding along while people play, except, we have the ability to actually have somebody literally there playing as well. So we take this notion to how do we bring interesting people into our game and let the entire community play along with them. By the way, that's great for engagement. It also is good business because there's a whole lot of ways that you can, there's a whole lot of business models you can build around that idea. And I mentioned before, we love this idea of location-based game and games that know where you are and are able to bring the game to you. We have a project with Niantic, which builds, Pokemon Go. You might have heard of it. Little kids game people play. Actually, that sounded. It's actually a very big game. Yeah, my sarcasm there sounded odd.
No. I'm British. We're very big on the sarcasm, so I picked it up.
There you go. So we're actually working with them on an NBA product, which kind of takes this whole idea of taking gameplay out into the real world, as opposed to just sort of bringing the game to you. We kind of go out to the real world and bring the game to you, depending on where you are. So it's that kind of technology. It's really taking that same competitive, that same competitive layer and just bringing it to people in multiple ways. Whether it's, you bring a celebrity into the game and everybody's competitive and just tries to beat that celebrity, whether you go out into the real world and we bring the gameplay based on where you are. Those are the things we're excited about. And those are the things that we're doing, but there's other companies that are doing similar stuff, and we always root for others to be successful and find things, because that's always great inspiration, right? You want people to succeed and uncover new opportunities, because again, if agility is our thing, being able to find opportunities, regardless of who's kind of uncovering them is always great, because then we get excited about that, and then we kind of jump in and see what could we do there. It's what we do is very competitive, but it's also very collaborative, because once someone is successful, you can't help but be curious about like, what can you do with that idea?
So the hardest question to answer, but lots to say. I loved it all.
Was there a point there? I'm sorry.
I enjoyed it. And that does bring us to time. But Mike, thank you very, very much for being on the show today. It's been a lot of fun. I love an opportunity to spotlight my deep, deep knowledge of American sports. And thank you, as always, to everyone else for listening.
Excellent. Thank you. Is what I wanted to say. Thank you for having me.